It's wonderful to see Perry Worldhouse back in action today. Students, faculty, and colleagues, welcome to Perry Worldhouse, the hub for global engagement at the University of Pennsylvania. My name is Amy Gadsden. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Global Initiatives here at Penn. And I am extremely honored to give opening remarks for tonight's very special event, our first public event of the 2024-2025 academic year, featuring Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, who is an exemplar of courage and commitment to democracy. Almost 10 years ago, we hosted our first ever Perry Worldhouse event, before we even had this building. It featured two of the band members from Pussy Riot, the all-female Russian punk band, who spoke about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the ongoing violations of human rights in Russia and former Soviet states, and the importance of speaking out against authoritarian violence. A decade later, sadly, we must continue this discussion, but I can imagine no one better to lead us in it than Madam Tsikhanouskaya. In 2020, after her husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky, was arrested for voicing his presidential aspirations against the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenka, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya decided to step in. She successfully united the democratic opposition to carry on with his campaign and ran on a platform calling for free and fair elections in Belarus. The success of her efforts surprised many, even her, but President Lukashenka declared himself the victor and underestimated the people of Belarus's support for a female leader. Sviatlana's election campaign inspired a massive and unprecedented peaceful protest movement in Belarus, with some rallies numbering hundreds of thousands of people. She was forced into exile, but her movement survived a violent crackdown and repression from Lukashenka's autocratic regime. Madam Tsikhanouskaya has called herself, and this is a quote, a woman, an unknown person, and a housewife. But she joins us here today as a global symbol of the peaceful struggle for democracy and the importance of strong female leadership, and also as a reminder of the ways in which ordinary people get called upon to do extraordinary things throughout history. Among dozens of distinctions, she is the recipient of the Sakharov Prize awarded by the European Parliament, the 2022 International Four Freedoms Award, and the Charlemagne Prize. She has been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize, both in 2021 and then again in 2022. She has been recognized as one of Bloomberg's top 50 most influential people, the Financial Times' top 12 most influential women, and Politico's top 28 most influential Europeans. As we are today 34 days away from a consequential election here in the United States, and as this year has seen more people than ever before in history going to the polls, with several major elections having taken place over the summer, Madam Tsikhanouskaya will share with us her thoughts on why democracy is still worth fighting for, even under the most difficult and dangerous circumstances. Joining her on stage will be Justin Vogt, Executive Editor of Foreign Affairs. Before joining Foreign Affairs in 2011, Justin Vogt was the Managing Editor of World Policy Journal. And earlier, he was a research editor and fact checker at The New Yorker, an associate producer of documentary films for the PBS series Frontline, and the business manager of the independent music label Palace Records. His writing has been published by The New Yorker, The New York Times, Slate, and many other outlets. I first want to welcome Madam Tsikhanouskaya to the stage to make some opening remarks, and then she will be joined later by Justin Vogt. Thank you.
So dear Ms. Amy Gadsden, dear students, professors, friends, first of all, accept my apologies for being late. The New York traffic during UN General Assembly is a real nightmare. But finally, I'm here, and I'm very pleased and humbled to speak here today at Perry Wodehouse University. Even though it is my first visit, I have heard so much about this incredible school and this wonderful city. When I received the invitation to become a visiting fellow, I had to double check and thought it might be a mistake. But today I'm happy to be here in Philly, the city which connects Belarusians and Americans. And not only because we have here super active Belarusian diaspora. Not far from this school, there is a memorial to Tadeusz Kościuszko. You know him as an American hero and fighter for your independence, but he is our Belarusian hero too. 200 years ago, he led the uprising against the Russian Empire on our lands. And his words, "For your freedom and ours," became one of the famous mottos during our uprising 2020. As you know, I have never planned to be a politician or revolution leader. The very idea of speaking at stage like this still drives me into panic, and I would feel much better to be in the audience as a student and learn from the best. But life knows how to make surprises and put us in unexpected situations. And you just have to be willing to do what is right. This happened to me 4 years ago when I suddenly had to become a presidential candidate. I call myself accidental politician, and Amy already told a little bit of my story because it was my husband, Sergei, who actually decided to challenge the dictator, to run against him. But when he was imprisoned, I ran instead of him. And first of all, I did it out of love to my husband. You know, I didn't expect so many people to support me because I was absolutely unknown person. But at that moment, people of Belarus had enough of dictatorship. People wanted changes, and the dictatorial regime wasn't able to contain its energy. Of course, elections in 2020 were rigged, and people went out to the streets to protect their voice. And at that moment, the regime unleashed brutal violence and plunged the country into terror. Thousands of people were imprisoned, tortured, and beaten. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands actually, were forced into exile, including me and my children. And this nightmare hasn't stopped for a single day for these 4 years. As we speak, thousands of Belarusians are staying behind the bars. Many political prisoners are held incommunicado. Maybe you even don't know what it is. It is when a person cannot be fully isolated. Lawyer cannot visit these people, letters are not delivered, and you just don't know anything about the fates of these people. My husband is one of these people kept incommunicado. I didn't hear from him more than 500 days. I don't know if he is alive. I don't know in what health condition he is. I want to believe that he's fine. And this is another form of torturing people. It's not just torturing of prisoners, but their families. And the aim of the regime is to break you, to seed frustration, and to make you give up. But you know what? All this terror and repressions in my country didn't stop our desire for changes. Though many of us are in exile, many are in prisons, but we continue to fight. When the dictator dragged our country into the Russian criminal war against Ukraine, we realized that the terror in Belarus was just a preparation for Russian invasion into Ukraine. And many Belarusians went to fight in Ukraine to be shoulder to shoulder with our brothers Ukrainians. Many gave their lives for our freedom and yours, as Kościuszko used to say. Our imprisoned Nobel laureate, Ales Bialiatsky, who celebrated his 62nd birthday today in prison, wrote that the future of Belarus depends on what would happen in Ukraine. And he's so right. Fates of our countries, Ukraine and Belarus, are intertwined. Without free Ukraine, there will be no free Belarus, but also vice versa. Without free Belarus, there will not be free and safe Ukraine. Russia doesn't see no Belarus nor Ukraine as independent countries. It sees them as disobedient colonies, which must be brought back under control. Democratic Belarus and independent Ukraine are a real nightmare for Putin. But when in Ukraine, Putin fights with shells and tanks, in Belarus it's a creeping occupation. Russia needs the terror to go on in Belarus and the country to be under control of the loyal dictator. Unfortunately, this all makes our fight even more difficult, but not hopeless. And let me be honest, I don't know when, how long it will take us to win, when and how the changes will happen. But we must do all we can to bring this moment closer. Sometimes you just have to do what is right, and history will put everything on its place. You know, the road to freedom might be long, it might be difficult, and along this path, it's so important to have allies. We count on the support of the United States of America and all democratic countries, because the fight for freedom is a global one, because tyranny is contagious. If not contained, it will spill over. Belarus is a good example of that. Therefore, I truly believe that it's moral obligation of every democratic country to stand with those who fight for freedom and for the values we all hold so dear, with people of Ukraine and with people of Belarus. You know, to prepare for today's discussion, I was sent a couple of questions, and I especially liked this one. Should American youth be cynical and pessimistic about democracy or passionate in its defense? You know, I don't think that, I think that we shouldn't be cynical or pessimistic about anything. We just must do what is right, and defending democracy is right thing to do. You know, when you live in democracy, you take such things for granted because it's like air. While you have it, you know, you breathe, but only when you lose it, you suffocate. Believe me, democracy is so easy to lose and so difficult to get it back. And we Belarusians know it so well from our own experience. We have to stand with those who fight for democracy. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, no one is free until all free. I believe that defending democracy everywhere in the world makes America stronger, not weaker. So, dear friends, in closing, I urge each of you to use your voice, your knowledge, and your passion to create change. Whether it is within your community or your country or in global scale, your actions have power. Real change takes time, but it starts with people like you who choose not to stand by in silence. So together we can build a world that upholds freedom, justice, and human dignity for all. God bless America. Long live Belarus.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sticking it out. I want to apologize on behalf of our entire country for our infrastructure. You've obviously been through worse, but as everyone in this room knows, it can be pretty bad. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. I was struck by something you said just now about the long road to freedom. people all over the world, and myself very much included, were inspired by the protests in Belarus, by your campaign. They were some of the most hopeful things that have happened, actually, in recent years. And you've endured things that few of us can really comprehend. And you've made extraordinary sacrifices in the cause of democratic change. What has happened in the past few years since then has been harder to watch and sobering, I think, to many of us. At least from the outside, it appears as if the Lukashenka regime has managed to crush the opposition movement, to sort of snuff it out through incredibly brutal means that you've described and which you know very well. I suppose my first question for you is, in the face of that kind of repression, how does a democratic movement like yours that's in exile hope to change the country from the inside? Put very simply, what is your theory of victory in this case?
If you can't do anything like visible inside the country, you have to put all your efforts being in exile to save those who are still hostages of this regime. I think that, for democratic society, it's very difficult to understand how people feel in the country where dictatorship prevails. Because when you wake up, you go to work, you all the time have to have a special bag where extra socks, toothbrush, toothpaste, because you can be detained at any moment for everything. You said a word against Lukashenka, or you donated to Ukrainian army, or you started to speak Belarusian language that is also forbidden in Belarus, though it's our official language. So you don't know what might be your crime. You're always overstressed. If you have relative who is in exile and this person is active, advocating for democratic Belarus, you're also in danger. Because we're in exile, but we have relatives inside the country. And we have to be ready to sacrifice with our property, with our relatives, because they are also threatened by the regime, because the regime put in revenge on you. But, those who are in exile, we can be more vocal, we can be more active, and we have to fight not only for those who are in exile, but for the whole country. So when I became accidental leader of democratic Belarus, accidental president-elect, I thought that our fight will be fast, because it was such a wonderful uprising. People were so united, and maybe we underestimated brutality of this regime. We thought naive, that if regime, will see millions of people on the streets, peaceful people who just want free and fair elections, they will say, okay, we are giving up. We underestimated this. And when I understood that our fight is not sprint, but marathon, I started to build alternative institutions of power. So for 4 years, since 2020, I managed to build my own cabinet where representatives on different directions are working. We managed to keep unity of people. 4 years of really difficult fight, but people want changes so much that they are keeping united. We are working with civil society, we are working with our alternative media, with human rights defenders, with our cultural initiatives. We have to develop everything and to keep people strong. So our strategy, our goals since 2020 haven't changed. Our task is to release all political prisoners, stop repressions, and hold free and fair elections. So this is, people have to gain right to choose whoever they want. For this, on this difficult path, of course, we can't go this alone. We need allies, as I said in my speech. And for 4 years, we managed to find so many friends all over the world, in European Union, in the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, Iceland, I don't know. So And I found so many nations and people, leaders, ordinary people, students who really want to help those who are fighting for democracy. And inspiring, it's really so inspiring. And it gives us energy to continue the fight. So our strategy is to weaken the regime and strengthen people. That's why we are asking to isolate regime economically, politically, to bring dictator and his cronies to accountability. But on the other side, I'm asking to strengthen our civil society, to give scholarships for Belarusian students, for them to see what and to feel what democracy is, what freedom is, studying in Western universities. We need to strengthen our media because we counter a huge propagandistic machine. They're trying to brainwash people. Also, I'm strengthening, of course, agents of democratic forces of our political structures. And my aim is to formalize relationship with the world. And for the first time in the history of the USA, American government launched strategic dialogue, not with government who are they seized power, but they're still in Minsk, in the capital of Belarus, but with government in exile. So it's fantastic, that we achieved so much. We formalized relationship with many European organizations. And so I'm telling about it so easily, but it's everyday hard work of many people. But again, what I understood from my very short political career, that if in any structure, in any government, parliament, organization, university, there is at least one person who really wants to help, this system will work. Because the most awful for me was to see empty eyes. When you are talking to people, you are sharing your pain, sufferings, and you see that, no, blindness. You couldn't touch the heart of this person. You understand that he or she will not do anything. But I met very few such people.
Interesting. That's hopeful. Who are your models? Who has done something like what you are trying to do?
Look, I'm absolutely sure that in every country, every nation has its own heroes who can inspire, whom you are proud of. But I am proud of every Belarusian. I'm proud of simple, ordinary people who are sacrificing their comfortable life, who are sacrificing their freedom. Many of them sacrifice their lives to gain freedom and independence in Belarus. So I read thousands of stories of Belarusians, who lost everything, who had to flee the country, or who are still inside the country, like very scared, but doing small things, and these small things change a lot. So I can call the names, they will not tell you anything, but believe me, like, okay, I'll give you an example, Masha Kolesnikova. She was my comrade during pre-election campaign. And when Dictator wanted her to leave the country, she tore her passport to stay in Belarus. Now she's in KGB, in prison. She was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and she's serving her term. But this is really sacrifice. And we have so many families like this and people.
Are there democratic opposition movements elsewhere that you've looked to, either historically or currently, that you feel you can learn from in terms of figuring out how to affect this kind of change inside your country?
Look, we, of course, on our path, we explored many nations who are fighting for democratic changes, against dictatorship, and every nation has its own peculiarities.
Sure.
You can't compare your fight with somebody else because, many obstacles. But what we can do, we can share our experience. We can change tools and methods how we are fighting with dictators, because some nations are more advanced in technical tools, some in media tools, so and of course solidarity is important. We are supporting each other, we are meeting on different events and communicate a lot, and all of them are inspirational.
I'm going to ask you a question that's a hard question, maybe, we'll see what you think. It's sort of conventional wisdom in the West that peaceful protest is the most legitimate means of effecting democratic change. But the history of Western countries, including our own, suggests that that's not always true. There are many countries where democratic movements have been forced eventually, or right from the start, to use violence and force against authoritarian or dictatorial regimes in order to get to something that looks closer to democracy. Think of South Africa, for example, or even Myanmar today. I wonder whether there are any circumstances in which you can imagine encouraging or even considering whether the peaceful methods that you used to such great effect years ago may eventually have to be supplemented or replaced with force.
Back in 2020, I heard voices, from people that, we have to be more brutal, we have to use violence. But I think that in the case when you answer with violence on violence, you lose this moral sovereignty. You just, the first time you use violence, the dictator could say that, look, my violence is justified by their violence, and I think that peaceful uprising, peaceful changes, they are more sustainable, of course, but new circumstances appeared. It's the war in Ukraine, and we hear maybe even more voices about dismantling of the regime by violence, because the war is nearby, and our military volunteers, Belarusians who are fighting in Ukraine, they more persist aggressive, because they are at the war and they think that Russia can be defeated only in this way. But I still want to avoid any violence from our side in the future. So I can't predict anything. Everything can happen. Life is unpredictable, but I would like to avoid this.
You mentioned the need for allies, and you mentioned the United States, and this long list of countries in Europe that you've made an incredible amount of progress with, as you mentioned, one of the first sort of governments in exile that Western governments have really taken seriously. What are the main things that you need from those governments? What are the main asks that you have of them?
Of course, nations who are fighting for changes, who are fighting against brutal dictatorship, we need a lot, really a lot. First of all, we need solidarity, and we need to feel that we are not abandoned, that we are not forgotten, that our fight is important to the world, that we are not left one-to-one with the dictator. And because when you're fighting day after day, experiencing this everyday pain, people in prisons, people are beaten, people losing everything, they have to flee the country. So your battery is, how you call it in English?
Sort of depleted, like.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And we have to recharge our battery constantly. And every act of solidarity, every sign of attention, every mentioning of Belarus, charging our battery. It keeps us moving forward. But of course, solidarity and words of condemnation is not enough, to win the fight. So that's why we need from a democratic, powerful world to use the instruments they have in the fight against dictatorship. Sanctions, I suppose, is the most efficient way to put pressure on the regime, to deprive regime of resources to continue terrorizing people, to continue, I don't know, help Russia with the military efforts. Sanctions, political isolation, make dictators pariahs. They have to know that they are not in the club of good nations, make them not relevant. It's about political, economic isolation, accountability. When people are detained every day, when people are persecuted, when people are interrogated and tortured, absolutely innocent people, there is need for justice. We can't gain justice in Belarus at the moment because it's a corrupted system, it's being to dictate at the moment. So we are looking for justice on international justice in international courts. We as representatives of our nation, we are collecting the evidences of crimes, and Lukashenko actually has a long list of crimes. It's crimes against Belarusians, crimes of torturing people, it's creating of migration crisis on the border with our Western neighbors, it's hijacking of an airplane, it's dragging our country into the war, it's abduction of Ukrainian children from occupied territories, long list. And we need to start special investigation against these crimes. It might be a long process. I fully understand it might take years, but message that it will send to dictators: we see you, we watch you, and you will be punished. And it also helps people, to feel, look, we are not alone. Democratic society is with us. Honestly speaking, for 4 years we didn't advance a lot in this direction, accountability, because it's a pity to say, but not all democratic institutions work correctly. And sometimes there is no political will, it's a slowness, bureaucracy, but our task is to move forward. So it's about punishment, it's about pressure on the regime. On the other hand, we need people to strengthen our agency, to strengthen our belief in the future. So we are asking democratic world to assist us, assist civil society, to support our alternative media, to support human rights defenders, to, as I said already, give scholarships to the students, to give more opportunity for Belarusians to travel and not to be one-to-one with dictator. Because honestly speaking, when you live in isolated society, when you can't get visas, when you can't travel, it's much easier to poison person with the propagandistic narratives because you're isolated. Though internet is still in Belarus, people can watch alternative media, but they want to touch democracy. They want to feel what it is, to live in free world. It's very important. And because for too many years, dictator's narrative was like, oh, it's rotten West. They don't have values. We have to be close to Russia because our countries are the best, so on and so forth. But when people travel and see what the real West is, they want Belarus to be the same.
I think you have a sort of personal experience of that, right? When you were young, you spent some time outside of Belarus. Isn't that right?
Yeah, actually, I was born in the region that was affected by Chernobyl disaster, and we had programs when many countries took children for vacation. So my country was Ireland, and I remember when I was 14 years old already, or 12, I don't remember, and I just appeared into different world. In Belarus, at that period was very poor country. We had to stand long queues to buy bread. We didn't have good clothes, and our parents had to work, from morning till evening just to get money. And I came to Ireland. I saw big shops full of food, full of clothes. But what was the most important impression, I saw people who were constantly smiling. I saw happy nation. And it was like cold shower for me. Why we are not the same? You know, why people talking to each other, people smiling. It might sound like, strange things, but in Belarus, everything was so like dull, you didn't talk to each other, you always was in your problems. And there people, hello, thank you, how are you? Just these small talks, you know very well. And it was like, maybe first understanding that something is going wrong with my country. And I think that's because many people managed to travel at that time. Many children, they grew up, and they started to fight with this regime very slowly. Just understanding. But yeah, this is how everything started.
It's another one of those things that we just take for granted, right? That's the air we breathe. Yeah. There's an interesting trade-off, maybe, where you've talked about the need to isolate the regime. One area where I can imagine that might be complicated is if you want to negotiate with the regime on the issue, say, of political prisoners, people like your husband and the thousands of others. What is your government in exile's position on that question? Should other governments and even your own movement have those kind of exchanges with the regime to try to get some of those people out?
Believe me, even if there is no official presence of any country in Belarus, because many embassies, many ambassadors don't work in Belarus anymore because Lukashenka is not recognized as legitimate ruler of the country, so many countries stop diplomatic relationship with Belarus. There are still chargés. Believe me, there are many ways to communicate with dictator, many ways to send messages from that side and from our side. So of course we are not blind. We know what's going on in Belarus, and but yes, you're right. We are trying to weaken the regime, but simultaneously we are trying to investigate the venues how we can release political prisoners. And this is about countries who are still have some relationship with the regime. For example, China. We can, through China, talk to regime and talk about release of political prisoners, or Qatar, or some bad guys, So there are possibilities. But it's a difficult process. When dictator is not pressed enough or not weak enough, there is no necessity for him to negotiate at all. So that's why pressure is so important. When you are in the corner, you will start to talk to people, to democratic world, and we have to be prepared for this. We have to have our conditions, on the table, our demands on the table, and of course we are coordinating our demands with our democratic allies. And in the case dictator will address them, they know what to answer.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. So those of you who are interested, please think of what you want to ask. The last question I have for you, though, is there's a lot of interest in this country about the relationship between the regime in Belarus and the regime in Russia. And I want to know how you would characterize it now and how it has changed in the past few years.
So first of all, I want you to clearly distinguish Belarusian regime and Belarusian people. Belarusian regime, dictator and his cronies, they are fully on the side of Russia at the moment. In 2020, Putin saved Lukashenka. If not for Putin's support, I'm absolutely sure that we would manage to dismantle the regime. But Putin helped Lukashenka economically and politically. I think that at that moment, Putin already knew that there will be invasion in Ukraine, and they needed a lie in the face of Lukashenko to provide our land, for attacking Ukraine, and that's why he saved him. And since then, Lukashenko is serving to Putin. He has to show all his loyalty, because Lukashenko can't rely on Belarusians, because Belarusians against him, and he knows that if there is a window of opportunity, for changes, Belarusians will be on the streets, Belarusians will uprise again. That's why he has to keep people, in a feast. But friendship between Putin and Lukashenko, it's not like real friendship. It's symbiotic relationship. They need each other at the moment. Putin needs Lukashenko is like buffer zone. They need each other to circumvent sanctions that imposed on Russia and Belarus. Most sanctions on Belarus are imposed on imports, on Russia on export. And they buying stuff for each other. They're selling stuff for each other. So. They like using each other at the moment, and actually Lukashenko doesn't take care about Belarus. He doesn't take care about our national identity. We see how to survive politically. He's selling our country, our independence, our sovereignty, piece by piece to Putin. We see how Russia is interfering into all spheres of Belarusian life, in media, economy, healthcare, education. They poison children's minds. And there is a process of Russification. They want to erase everything Belarusian from our country. And Lukashenko is ready to give it because he wants to stay in power. So yeah, and sometimes I hear from politicians that maybe without sanctions we push Lukashenko closer to Putin's hands. Right. He's already there, and there is no task to save Lukashenko from Putin. Our task is to save Belarus from Lukashenko. So there are no simple solutions, no in Belarus, no in Ukraine, but the democratic world have to stay consistent and strong in their policy, because dictators feel weakness. And this sometimes undecisiveness they perceive as weakness, and it's emboldened them.
Okay, if you have a question for our guest, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Someone will bring a mic over, and please identify yourself. Please also make sure to ask a question and make it sort of sharp so that our guest can have as much time as she can. First, we'll go to the young lady seated here, please.
Hi, my name's Solme. I'm a freshman in the college. And my question to you is, does it make you nervous when you see in the United States that there's a candidate who historically for the presidential elections doesn't really support or undermines the election system in the United States? Does that make you nervous in relation to how in the next 34 days, if we have like a new president next year, how that might change your fight in Belarus?
First of all, let me say that you are happy people. You have such a luxury not to know who will be your next president. Because in dictatorship, all the time it doesn't mean how you are voting. You know that it will be reappointment of the dictator. Of course, we understand that so much in the world depends on the policy of the USA. You are the most powerful country in the world. You influence a lot of processes. And there are so many talks about who will be the next president of the USA, because policy can change radically. We as Belarusian Democratic Forces, we enjoy support of, we enjoy bilateral or bipartisan support from the USA. And what is important in democracy, that one person can't change all the policy. You have system of restrictions, you have Senate, you have nation who can dictate the leader, the president, what they want him to do. So I want to believe that the policy of the USA will not change attitude to Ukraine and Belarus. I want to believe that people of the USA understand that any stop of assistance to Ukraine or given or letting Ukrainians to lose this war, it will be defeat not only of Ukraine, it will be defeat of all democratic world, because dictators will think that they won this fight. So, but this is your obligation to work with your president, whoever it will be.
Okay, the gentleman right behind you, please.
Thank you. So my name is František Brezo, and I'm a freshman from Slovakia in the College of Arts and Sciences. And my question would be to Madam Tsikhanouskaya, that whether you see a real chance for a change in regime in the upcoming decade, and if yes, what kind of event can you imagine as a catalyst to the downfall of dictatorship and the possible creation of democratic Belarus? Thank you.
So I think I'm gonna sharpen that a little bit. It's a version sort of the question I asked you initially, which was, how do you get from here to there? And I guess what I would ask is, a version of this would be, by setting up a government in exile, if the protest movement were to start again, do you feel you would, and you were welcomed back into the country, would you be able essentially to just take office, to take power? What would be the mechanism by which, if you were allowed back in, how would that work?
So as I have said already, our goal is to hold free and fair elections. There is no aim for me to take office for, 5 years. I promised to Belarusian people when they voted for me in 2020, then when there will be free and fair elections, next time I will not participate, because it would create this momentum of competition now. I don't want people to compete with me. I don't want people to compete with each other now. We have to be one big, powerful movement. But only through free and fair elections, people can choose their leader. I know that it will be a transitional period. We will have to prepare these elections, maybe a month or two. And if I'm in office, my task will be to keep people secure, to keep stability on this period of time, to hold a couple of very fast reforms. For example, constitutional reform, because now, according to Lukashenka's constitution, president has unlimited power. We have to erase, this. So, but yeah, free and fair elections.
Good. Okay, the young lady standing in the back with her hand up there.
Thank you. My name is Kyla. I'm a PhD student in the political science department, and I'm studying the orchestration of a migration crisis that Lukashenko has conducted. And you briefly mentioned this earlier. But in your view, has Lukashenko's orchestration of this crisis affected Belarus's relationship with the European Union? And do you believe this strategy has an impact on the internal stability of Belarus?
Our neighbors who were mostly affected by this orchestrated migration crisis, they fully understand what's happening in Belarus. And they know that Lukashenko was doing this to blackmail Western countries because they supported us so much, because they didn't recognize Lukashenko. The other aspect is that they wanted to drag attention of neighboring countries from the war in Ukraine, from sending assistance troops to Ukraine, but concentrating on the internal problems, border problems. And it's really caused, a lot of discussions, this migration crisis, because nobody paid attention that Lukashenko is using human beings, to blackmail. There were discussions to let these migrants in Europe or not. Red Cross was there, Red Cross that have never got access to political prisoners, to check how they are. But they immediately were on the borders blaming Poland or Lithuania that they don't let these people in. But explanation is simple. If you let dictator to blackmail you, they will intensify this. And it's already 2 or 3 years that this migration crisis is not ending. And though our neighboring countries trying to look for opportunities to decrease it, like Polish President Duda, he went to China. So as China still has some relationship with Belarus, and Belarus is geographically important for transition of Chinese goods to Europe, it worked, and the number of migrants decreased. But we understand that while dictator is in power in Belarus, there will be constant threat to neighbors. Nuclear weapon, migrants, I don't know, different drills, drones. Dictators don't hesitate to use these, ugly methods to influence Western world.
It's a good question and a good dissertation topic, actually. Yeah, let's go to the gentleman sitting right in front of me here.
Hello, I'm Khalil. I'm from Tunisia, studying international relations at the college, a freshman. So I have 2 questions. First, thank you for your time, and personally, thank you for inspiring me because I can relate a lot to your words. We are 8 days away from historic election in Tunisia in a project of tyrant, like your scenario in 2020, and it's not going so well so far. So my 2 questions. So first, if you could engage directly with one of the least, the minority of people who are still loyal to Lukashenka regime, what would you say to them? I'm facing a lot of people who are still loyal to the Tunisian current regime, and I don't know what to say to them at this point. And secondly, if Belarus achieves democracy, and I believe it will sooner or later, what would you prioritize first? Would it be media freedom, judicial freedom, stabilizing economy, or other prioritization? And thank you again.
I'm going to ask you to just take the first question, just to give everyone a chance, because it's a very interesting question. What do you say to Belarusians who still do support the regime?
Absolutely right. It's so important to talk not only to people who want changes, but maybe those who believe in dictatorship, in strong fist, because for 30 years of dictatorship, there are fans of Lukashenko, of course. It mostly people of older generation, who have nostalgia of Soviet Union times, because they were young, and everything was fine when you're young. And but of course, we are trying to talk to these people through media, of course, to send messages that, look, it's not about personalities. Our country is not about Lukashenko or Tsikhanouskaya or somebody else. Our country is about, our nation. And with Lukashenko or after changes, we have to live together. We can't achieve stability or prosperity when we are fighting to each other. Lukashenko is very scared that more and more people are, want changes in Belarus. They are on our side. And that's why he's using this narrative. If these people will come to the power, they will hang you on the lamps. They will kill you, they will put you in prisons. And we explaining, look, we together have to build our country, have to raise our economy, we have to look for investments into our country. We are one nation. I think that we will have to go through reconciliation process for sure. I think that all those who have committed heavy crimes have to be punished. But ordinary people who work in this system, technocrats, mayors of the cities, who didn't commit anything very seriously, they should stay on their places, continue to work if they agree with democratic principles. So we are trying to explain this to people. And honestly speaking, there are so many people in the system who might look like, loyal to Lukashenko, they are sending us inside information. They are giving us data, how sanctions are circumvented, for example. So being in the system, they work for us because they have families inside. It's fear. They don't want their families to be harmed, but they want changes. And very secretly, we are providing such channels. They're sending us useful information. So this is, and Lukashenko knows this. He can't trust anybody around himself. He's shuffling people, all the time. He feels very insecure and fragile. Violence, Russia, and money, this is what he has. It's like chair with 3 legs. That's why we have to cut at least 1 leg for all construction to collapse.
It's interesting to hear that you have people on the inside who are helping you. It's a different kind of bravery in a sense than the kind shown by you and other protest leaders, but it's very important, I would think, to your movement. Are there other questions? Yes, the young man here.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm Jonah. I'm a student here, and I'm wondering how the Belarusian diaspora can keep our culture alive when our physical connection with the country no longer exists.
First of all, I want to say how grateful I am to Belarusians abroad who also so intensely united in 2020, who maybe even lost understanding that, especially those who live so long abroad, they lost understanding that I'm Belarusian. In 2020, they started to be proud that I'm Belarusian. They contributed so much in our fight. They were voice of our uprising in their countries, because before 2020, hardly anybody heard about Belarus. Maybe you thought that there was Poland and Russia, and our country was like a gray zone. And in 2020, people rediscovered Belarus, and Belarusian diaspora played a huge role in this. And for 4 years, Belarusians abroad started, they united, they started to build communities, organizations, promoting everything Belarusian, speaking about Belarus, telling about Belarus. They help in many aspects. So keeping Belarusian identity alive abroad. Also, usually Belarusians abroad are more prosperous than Belarus inside the country. They have businesses, and they are donating a lot, donating to political prisoners and their families, donating to our military volunteers in Ukraine, donating money to people who need rehabilitation after they served their terms in prisons, donating to different initiatives, because we badly need assistance. Just, the whole troops in theaters left their job because they didn't want to serve to this regime. And these people fled Belarus, and they have to work as wonderful people, actors have to work in Uber, just because they have to earn something. So we need to keep our people of culture alive. That's why we need donations so much to keep them alive. Human rights defenders also from the same story. And Belarusian diaspora is helping a lot. Belarusian businesses abroad. But the most important that they are our voices on the places. I myself, I'm alone. I can't be everywhere simultaneously, and Belarusians are my voice. They have to work with local parliament. They have to work with local government, to know about Belarus. Belarusians actually now who live abroad face a lot of problems with legalization, for example, because to punish those active Belarusians, Lukashenko forbade embassies in the world to renew documents, for example. And if a person living in the USA, he was very active, he is recognized as extremist in Belarus, or he helped a lot to political prisoners, and his passport is expired. He can't return home because he will be detained immediately. What should he do? That's why we are looking for opportunities. We are talking to governments, help Belarusians to simplify legalization. We are hardworking, honest, modest people. We want to work, but give us possibility, to do this. And this is like local problems that arise also solved or promoted, by Belarusians. I'm deeply grateful to Belarusians living abroad.
There was some talk actually of creating something like an alternative passport at one point. Are those talks still going? Are people still working on that?
This is us who are working on this here. Actually, so many countries have different legislation about legalization of people. And we proposed, I think, best solution to the world, how to help Belarusians, because very soon, if the situation will be like this 1 and 2 years else, we will have hundreds of thousands stateless people who can't return home, who have expired documents, new people, new like children are born, people have to get divorced, people have to travel, and if they don't have identification, card, you can't do anything in this world. So to solve this issue systematically, we decided to issue our own passports, passport of new Belarus. It's a very difficult project because the world is not ready for anything new. It's unprecedented, and everything unprecedented is scary. But so as we have to solve this problem for Belarusians, we are step by step going on. Very soon we will come to each government with specimen of passport and we'll start process of recognition. It will be extremely difficult, believe me, but we have to open this door because, to help Belarusians. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes. The gentleman with the turtleneck here sitting there, yeah.
Hi, my name is Daniel. Is there any active interchange between the Belarusian diaspora in exile and the Russian opposition diaspora in exile? How much do their interests align, and is there anything that they could learn from each other?
So I have to say that Russian opposition and Belarusian democratic forces, we have different context. Because in Belarus, people, we are majority who are against Lukashenka. We want changes. Majority, we are united. We have representative of democratic forces. We have already institutions. We achieved a lot for 4 years. But of course, opposition in Russia, they also want some changes in Russia. I don't want to interfere into their political messages, what they want to achieve, because I take care of Belarus at the moment. But we can share tools that we are using to fight with propaganda, to fight with corruption, to, to reach almighty people of the world, how to build our narratives. But we don't have a lot in common. And so that's why, yeah, we are meeting time to time, different events, but it's not like deep interference. They inviting us on the media, to talk about Belarus. Yeah, but we can't compare our fights.
Well, we've reached the end of our time, and I want to just share something very briefly with you. This has been, to me at least, a very sort of hopeful session, and one of the hopeful signs actually was the turnout that you had here at the World House to hear you. We were backstage, and Sviatlana said to me, in my country, these students would have been forced to attend. And I assured her that that was not the case here, that people wanted to come and they wanted to hear you, and I think that we can all see why. So on a personal level, I just want to tell you that I find what you're doing to be incredibly admirable. I think that your country is extremely lucky to have you in the position that you are in. Someday, maybe in another position. Thank you so much. Please join me in.